Hello and welcome to the One Giant Leap podcast with your host, Jeff Shrimpton. And today my special guest is PR expert, Kevin Briscoe. Say hi, Kevin.
Hi, good afternoon.
So Kevin, I've invited you on today because I want to talk about PR so that I can help the audience have a better understanding of that. But before we do that, let's just get a bit of your credentials. I think you were a journalist first, weren't you? Just talk us through your career.
Yeah, I started off as a journalist. I worked in daily newspapers, daily regional newspapers, did a bit of broadcast work as well, and a little bit of work for national newspapers. Really doing all sorts of general journalism, but also sports journalism. I wrote features, and I was the TV editor for a while, so I did lots of celebrity film launches and TV launches and things like that in London. So it was quite a varied career. But then after about 9 years or so doing that, I then moved into corporate communications with Hampshire Police. And it was an old school press office, churning out news stories for the media, being that interface really between police officers, senior officers who were investigating serious crimes, and the media who wanted the information to inform the public. So did that for a number of years, rose up to be the head of media and corporate communications for Hampshire Police before packing that in and going out to do some consultancy.
Great. So now you've got your company, Briscoe PR, and they work. Do you work in specific niches or across the board? What kind of work do you do with the business?
Yeah, we're a general PR agency, so we don't focus on one particular industry or one particular sector. I mean, when we started out, we've been going 10 years this year. When we started out, we were largely a business-to-business agency. So we did a lot of business-to-business work and had a really clear focus on that. But over the years, that has started to change, and we do a lot more consumer-facing work now. So, for example, in the past 12 months, we've done quite a bit of retail work, for example. So we're doing a lot more consumer-facing work now. Probably consumers even taken over business-to-business slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So help me out here, Kevin. PR, we've all seen was it Absolutely Fabulous, the TV show, and I know your office is just round the corner from mine, and I've not heard any wild parties going on there. So tell us a bit more about what PR actually is and how it works for a business.
Of course. Well, so it's not all about quaffing champagne and going to wild parties all the time.
What a shame! I'd be so up for that.
Exactly. And I think in some sectors and in some areas, that is a large part of the work of a PR agency. So, for example, if you're a London agency and you're particularly working in fashion or beauty PR, then maybe you do a lot of that. I don't know. That's not what we do. We are a regional PR agency. We work with a real cross-section, a broad range of businesses from small to medium to large. And it's hard work. It's not just the same as going out to parties and a little bit of fluff here and there. It's actually hard work.
So what do you actually do for
them? So PR is really about helping businesses to communicate what they do. So the art of public relations really is about improving your reputation so that your reputation is in such a state that people will want to do business with you. So we do that by communicating different aspects of a business, what its ethos is, what it stands for, who the people are in it, and of course what they actually do and what they sell or what service they provide. And we use the media to communicate that. So media press releases that go into newspapers, magazines, broadcasters, online. We run social media campaigns for people, not social media marketing. It's different to marketing your business, but actually really promoting all the positive aspects of your business. Social media, like I say, all of the social media platforms, blogging content on website content, award entries, all of those sorts of things. It's a real broad brush approach to really enhancing the profile of a business, especially targeted at its customers or its potential customers.
I think one of the misunderstandings is you said at the start there that you use it to get the message out about the ethos and the services and things of a business, but you can't use the press to get free advertising, can you? So tell me about how you do because we're thinking as a business owner, yes, I want customers to come to me because I want them to see it in the press. I'm not going to pay for an advert. I'm getting a free, in inverted commas, although you probably have to pay someone to write the thing for you. But they're not. The newspapers aren't just going to print your adverts, are they, for free?
No, they're not. They're really not. And I know from when I worked in newspapers, people would send in all sorts of stuff that they just thought that the newspaper would print, and we won't. Actually, newspapers sell advertising. If you have something that is advertising, then the newspaper journalist will quite rightly say, talk to the advertising people, because we sell that space for people to place adverts. What we specialize in is finding the stories. So what is a story in your business? And every single business has loads of stories in it. And what we do is we tease out those stories, write up those stories with photographs, and tell them in a way that is news, so that a newspaper journalist will look at that and think, yes, that is news. At the end of the day, news is about people. So find the people in your business. They're the ones, or find the people who are affected by what you're doing as a business, and tell the story from their perspective.
It's that emotional journey, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Somebody at some point was here, and because of that business or the thing that happened, they're now somewhere else, an emotional place, whether it's happy to sad or sad to happy, hopefully not that one. That someone's gone through a journey, and the context of it is in the business. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And that's if you're going to pique a journalist's interest in your story, then you've got to be able to show that journey has taken place for someone. It doesn't have to be a named person or an identified person. It's just a group of people, the sort of people who read the publication that you're trying to reach. And that doesn't matter whether you're in business to business. You might be producing widgets, specialized widgets for a particular kind of mechanical engineering. You've still got magazines, and you can still get your news stories into those sorts of publications, whether you're doing that or whether you're trying to get into the Daily Mail or the Sun or the Times.
So what's not a story?
Well, there's a lot of things that are not stories. So a classic one, an absolute classic one, which, I wish I had £1 for every time someone had said this to me, was, we've got a new website. Can we do a press release about our new website?
Hold the front page.
You know what? Nobody is interested in the fact you've got a new website.
No.
It's your pride and joy, and polish it as much as you want and as much as you can do. But the fact that you have a new website, nobody's interested in that. So don't try and issue a press release about it, because journalists aren't interested in writing about it. Find something else. Maybe the website does something that is of massive benefit to your customers or your employees or something like that. Then maybe there's a story there.
Yeah,
but just the fact,
twist, isn't it?
Exactly. Just the fact you've got a new website, no, that's never going to cut it. The other thing that a lot of people think is a story is when they start talking about special offers that they've got going on, or a sale that they've got going on, or something like that. Let's do a press release about this voucher that we're giving away for people to come and spend in our shop or whatever. Nobody's ever going to write a story like that. And why would they? Because actually those organizations, they exist only because they can sell advertising to businesses who want to talk about their sale or their vouchers or those sorts of things.
You see, I've seen on the news, especially coming out of lockdown, but over the years as well, interviews with people who have camped out overnight for the next sale or whatever sale it is. But that's, I suppose, then it's the human interest, the fact that some nutcase is sat outside in, the 26th of December for the Boxing Day sale and spent the night in a tent on the street. That's then human interest in a story, isn't it?
Yeah, and that is human interest, but and the only place really that could probably get away with something, if people are queuing for the Harrods sale, because Harrods is a name on its own and that's something special. But even then, the TV cameras don't really go in and start talking in general terms about what's in the Harrods sale. They might talk about Mrs. Miggins at the front of the queue who's waiting to get a £5,000 TV for 50 quid. That's it, but they're not even then not talking about the brand. They're not interested in that as a story. The story for them is the fact that someone gave up their Christmas and sat in a deck chair outside a drafty department store rather than sitting at home in the warm having a proper roast dinner like the rest of us.
Or I suppose if people start fighting over things on the shelves, that
the Black Friday stuff.
Yes, but there's just an example of how we create that emotional human thing that we need in order to make it an interesting story. Because you're not really selling it to journalists, are you? You're really selling it. Who's going to pick up a newspaper or magazine and go, "Oh, that's of interest to me. I'd like to read that."
Yeah, exactly. And when you're doing press releases or coming up with your stories for journalists, what you should be thinking of is the audience. Your audience isn't the journalist. The journalist is sort of like your middleman, the person who takes your story, puts it in a newspaper or magazine that's then read or consumed by their readership. And that's your audience. They're the people that you're talking to, and they're the people that you should be really, highlighting different aspects of your story too. It's not the journalists. They're not your number one target.
Yeah. So me, Kevin, I'm a business coach, and I don't ever advocate chucking money at stuff and not knowing whether you're getting a response from it. And PR has got a reputation for being a bit fluffy. I'm going to spend money on it. I don't know if it's working or not. And it's always a question of mine is, how do we make it tangible? How do you know if it's working, that you're getting benefit from it? Is it possible?
Yeah, it absolutely is. It used to be that measuring the impact of PR was quite difficult and it was intangible, but that has all changed now, because it's for example, we measure everything. We measure everything, every single thing that we do, from whether it's coverage in newspapers or social media impact, or the number of visitors to a website or a landing page on a website, which, if it's a particular campaign, we say to the client, let's produce a specific landing page on your website. Then we'll actually be able to measure exactly how much extra traffic you're getting specific to this campaign. So there are lots and lots of things that we do to measure. Like I say, we use all of the social media measurements as well. One thing that's really crucial right at the very beginning of any PR campaign is to sit down and absolutely define what your objectives are. So once you've got the objective, why are you doing it? Don't just do it because someone said do some PR. What are your objectives? And really nail down what the objectives of your PR campaign are. And then it's a lot easier to measure against those objectives, because actually we can take those objectives and say, okay, here's the measurements of the work that we've been doing that are in service of the objectives that you set out for this campaign.
Good answer, and particularly well done with the distraction of the phone in the background there.
Yeah, sorry about that.
You need to get your team out of lockdown so they can answer the phones for you. All right, that's great. So have you got any examples of campaigns that you've done that maybe give people inspiration for how they can turn something that they want to communicate to their audience into a story that's going to run?
Yes. So there's a number. We've done lots of campaigns, but
I hope so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in the past 12 months, we've done a few on, let's say, retail. Let's take retail as an example. So in the past 12 months, we've worked with a couple of retailers during lockdown. They're both essential traders. Both of them moved. One of them moved into a whole new shop. They were a pet store, moved into a new store, which was probably 3 or 4 times the size during the middle of lockdown. And we worked with them to actually really establish what their objectives are. We did a whole load of news coverage before the move and then at the move, and they got lots of coverage for that. lots of social media activity as well, to really make sure that their audience, which is their customers, were really aware of what was going on.
So when you
And
say lots of coverage, is that print? Is that radio, newspaper, TV?
yeah, so we got lots of print coverage in the, so for them, they're Southampton, they're over Southampton way, so it's Southampton Echo, but also the New Forest Post and further afield Hampshire Chronicle, those sorts of things. We got radio coverage as well. You know, you're not always going to get TV coverage for stories like that, but where there's a possibility, we'll always try and get TV coverage for people as well, but not on that occasion. So we got good coverage.
So what was your angle? That you say that, you know, that business has just moved and that's what they want to let everybody know, but you can't just write to the journalist and say, hey, we've moved, because like, who cares? So how did you actually twist that into being a story?
Yeah, so the angle there is that the owner of this business was investing a significant amount of money, a huge amount of money, in their business in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of lockdown. So despite this kind of end of the world scenario, which is a bit what it felt like a year ago when it was all getting going, here was this person who just stepped forward and said, you know what, we're going to invest an enormous amount of money in our business because we're confident in it. And, you know, that's the sort of story at that time people really wanted to read and really wanted to hear, because you know, all they were hearing at the time was how businesses were in trouble, businesses were closing, businesses were coming to an end. But actually here was one that was really bucking the trend. And that's what the story is. It's bucking the trend. It's not the fact that, hey, a new shop is opening in Totton. It's the fact that this shop owner, this businesswoman, has decided to invest a significant amount of money in doing this piece of work.
Brilliant. So it's good, but someone's going against the tide. That's good news for people, isn't it? And
yeah, absolutely.
Especially at that time, you know, a year ago in 2020 in March, when the first lockdown happened, we were all in a place where, what the hell's this?
Yeah.
And to have good news stories coming out at that point would probably is why you know that was the right angle, and that's why you got lots of coverage for it.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, we had another client, very similar actually, but they did a refurbishment job on their farm shop in the Meon Valley, and again spent a significant amount of money. But what they did was, so the essence of the story was these people had taken their business and transformed it, and developed it into something slightly different, well, very different actually, a very different sort of business, right in the middle of a pandemic, and made a massive success out of it, a huge success out of it. And again, that was on the, you know, not entirely, but was supported, because that's our role really, is to support that work with really good media coverage, really good social media coverage, and lots of other activity as well that just starts to make people aware of what they're doing and what's new, because you know, people we're desperate for that sort of good news type story.
And I know that business that you're talking about as well is a very good business, and I know that the owner of the business, very humble guy. It's not somebody who particularly would enjoy the limelight. And I know you've got so much TV. You got him on the TV. I watched him having my dinner whilst he was on the TV recently, and lots of radio interviews. So he's a reluctant superstar at the moment, isn't he? That he's in the limelight.
Yeah, and we'll always persuade people to do that. And you know, people, it is out of your comfort zone sometimes.
Yeah,
to do that sort of thing, but we'll always persuade and support people as much as possible with that. You know, from my time working with Hampshire Police, I did it a lot myself, and I've had to support people doing it. So I'm not bothered about it, but I know that a lot of people are. But actually, just with the right bit of encouragement, support, and help, people can really shine when they do it. And you know, for this particular business, they've really grasped and grabbed all of those opportunities that have come their way, and it's really paid dividends.
Yeah, and I think that reluctance to get into the limelight sometimes, which I can relate to, I know the one person who thought he did the worst on that TV interview ever was, of course, the guy who's in the interview. Because I watched it, I thought, oh God, he's done really well. That was great. And I know, but I also know it's quite nerve-wracking. I've just remembered during this, my first ever TV appearance, which was part of a PR campaign, was when I was a manager of a nightclub in Portsmouth, and part of that, we got an interview on the local radio station. Sorry, the local TV, the internet TV in Portsmouth, I don't know what it's called. And we were second billing to an albino bullfrog. And I was absolutely terrified at the time, and we were also wooden and terrified. I think it had an audience of my mum, and that's about it. But it can be nerve-wracking, isn't it, when people get into the limelight like that? But it's always important to know that the person who thinks you've done the worst is the person who's on the interview, isn't it?
Yeah, and people are always really, really self-critical, and actually nobody ever notices that.
No.
People are much more critical of themselves in those sorts of things. It's a bit like when you have your photograph taken.
Yeah.
People say, "Oh, I don't like that for this reason or that reason." Most people have never even noticed that. So, and it's the same when people do TV or radio. They say, "Oh, I did go a lot," or "I did go a lot," and actually, you probably didn't. And people don't really notice that. It's just the way people talk.
Yeah, you have to get quite used to the sound of your own voice as well, because when you hear it when you speak yourself, that you conduct the sound through the bones. So when you hear it recorded and it comes through your ears, it sounds totally different. And you do have to get used to the sound of your own voice. And I've got these podcasts, and I know I listen back to them. I sound like stuttering Stanley sometimes, and I listen to them, but I've gone, do you know what? I'm not going to edit them. I'm just putting them out. Because it's me, it's who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be someone I'm not.
That's right.
And I think, and just giving myself permission to stutter occasionally and say a lot, what feels like a lot, helps me relax, and I just go with it. Give yourself the permission to be imperfect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. People want to see the real person, don't they? Really, that's all. That's your brand. I think it's people want to see the real person rather than necessarily take 25 takes to make sure it's the absolute perfect all the time.
Yeah. So, Kevin, if people have been listening to this and they're thinking, well, that sounds interesting. I've got something that I think is newsworthy. I wonder if we can get a spin on that. What do they need to do in order to get it into the local national papers and on the TV and stuff?
Yeah. So, first of all, every single business should be doing PR. So if you're not doing it, then you should start now, because, there's never a better time to start. So every single business has stories to tell, and they've all got opportunities to get some coverage for it. Really, the best thing to do is they can, they need to write it down, start to produce something that looks a bit like a news release. Look at what's the publication they're targeting. What sort of stuff do they write in there at the moment? Find a way of making your story, quite similar to that, and send it in to journalists. If you've got the right angle, don't try and make it into an essay and write some war and peace piece of work. Keep it quite short and snappy. 250 words, 300 words maximum. Always get a photograph with it. Always needs a photograph, especially these days. And then send it in to the journalist. Find out who your local business editor is, or if it's a trade publication, find out who one of the journalists is on that publication, and then send it in directly to them and say, I've got this story, I've had a go at it. Is this something you're interested in? The alternative is, of course, you hire a PR agency. And a PR agency will be able to come in and take all of that work away from you, especially if you think we've got lots and lots of opportunities, we just haven't got the time to exploit them. Then that's when you
some of the challenge of doing it on the cheap would be the fact that you think, okay, I'll Google some stuff and I'm going to do some learning around it and download maybe some press release templates and things like that. But it's a lot about relationships, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
About knowing the right journalist to send it to. And I think people could, if you do go on their own, they're quite likely to get disheartened quite quickly and send out a dozen things, get nothing back, and then go, that's no good, and then give up on PR.
Yeah, and there's a big risk with that. Business editors, even at regional newspapers, they get probably 150, 200 press releases a day. And yet you look at the business pages of a daily regional newspaper, it has 3, 4, 5 stories. So out of those 150 to 200 news releases they're getting every day, they're only going to use 5. So what do you do to make your one stand out from the crowd and be different? And, you know, a lot of that is down to relationships. We have fantastic relationships with all the journalists on all publications, actually, up and down the country. And we've got all the contact details for those people. So we've got those good relationships in place. We also recognize what makes a good story. So it's a lot easier for someone like me, who's a journalist by training, to recognize something that's a story. So if you did come to me and say, hey, we've got a new website, I'll say, don't waste your time, because you're wasting your time trying to do a press release about that. There's a much better story here about something else you've mentioned. Let's do a bit more work on that.
Unless you've got something like every person who clicks on there, you're going to give £1 to a charity or something like that makes it into a story.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a PR professional in to help you, then they will make a massive difference to the storytelling that you want to get across, and they'll make sure as well that you don't fall into any traps, like trying to do a story about something that you really probably shouldn't be touching with a barge pole.
So I think that if you are going to do it yourself, educate yourself as much as possible and be like resilient to the rejection, because you're going to have to learn how to do this thing. Is you're going to have to go, right, there's no point in going, I'm going to send 3 press releases and I'm expecting to be in the paper. You probably have to send 50 and actually build up some relations, phone up somebody in the newspaper and say, hey, look, what sort of thing would you be looking for, and build that relationship. If you're prepared to do that, then you can, I suppose, save yourself some money, but you'll put a lot of time into it. Or there's tons of people out there of I'm sure varying price and quality that you can use. And I know several PR people, and they all just ask the right questions of the things that I hadn't thought of at the time. I know that when I've worked with them before. And that's really what you pay your money for, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's recognizing that, you know, that you've covered everything, because you know, if you've left information off your press release that a journalist really needs for their story, it's quite easy for them to just say, oh, I'll just get rid of it and move on to the next one, rather than ringing you up and asking for that detail that's missing. Because like I say, they've got so many to choose from. They might just think, oh, I'll scrap that one and I'll move on to something else where it has got all the information. So what you need is to make sure that you've actually got a really full, a complete package with your story that essentially lands with the journalist, that kind of almost doesn't really give them much work to do. So that
that's the thing, is they don't have to rewrite the whole thing. Essentially, you want them to do it for, make it easy for them so they can copy and paste it, and it's newsworthy, isn't it?
Exactly. You know, and you know, we tend to produce our press releases for clients and write them the way that the newspaper that we're targeting, or the magazine that we're targeting, the way that they write them. And we write them in that particular style. We've got that journalistic background ourselves. And if you write it in that style, a journalist will look at that and think, you know, they might be under a huge amount of pressure to fill pages. And if something arrives in their inbox and it's just perfect, literally got all the information they need, written in the right style, they can just make a few little changes to it and it can almost just go slot straight in.
Yeah. I was thinking to ask you a question and saying, have you got any examples of, you know, a one article that went in somewhere and made a business brilliant? But actually, as that question formed into my head, I'm thinking you might have, and I'll ask you that in a minute, but it's much more likely actually that a campaign over a period of time of getting 20,000 eyes on in this newspaper, 5,000 eyes on in this one, a few thousand ears on in this radio campaign. It's not just a one-hit wonder, is it? I'm guessing.
That's right. You know, PR works best when you do little and often. So you do it over a sustained period of time. So PR, you can do a PR just for a launch. And those 2 examples I used earlier about 2 retail businesses, they essentially both of them brought us in really to do a launch, but they've kept us on afterwards. and we're now running long-running campaigns for both of them. And that's what works best, because you can do a launch, but it's kind of here today, gone tomorrow.
Yeah.
The way to really get to raise your profile and your reputation, and to actually get under people's skin, is to really drip your messaging constantly in front of them. So
it's about consistency, isn't it?
Yeah. So you should be appearing in newspapers, you should be appearing in their Facebook stream, in their LinkedIn, in their Twitter. So they say that people need to see something 3 times before they make a conscious decision about it.
I think it's a lot more than that.
Yeah, maybe more.
Days, so bombarded with so many messages.
Yeah,
I remember a few years ago, I paid a PR person. I was holding an event. So, well, I paid them to write an article and send it to their contact in the local newspaper, and they did print it. It went online and printed, and I got not really anything from it. And I just went, oh, that's a bit rubbish. But in hindsight, thinking about what I should have done is employed her to do a campaign that got me in that paper and on the radio and on this and on that. So I'm talking about it to lots of times, rather than just one day in one newspaper in a tiny little square, which isn't going to do it, is it?
No, it's not. Well, not on its own, generally speaking. Sometimes it can. And it might have done 20 years ago, when papers were read by so many people. These days, papers are read by a lot, the actual newspapers themselves don't sell as well, but their websites are fantastically popular, really hugely popular. That's why the regional media is still so important to all businesses, for the online coverage that you get. But really, it's better to build up your reputation, work on your reputation over a long period of time. So 6 months, 12 months, doing a little bit each month. It's like adding a sheet of paper to a ream of paper. That's how you build up your reputation. It just grows a little bit at a time, little bit at a time, little bit at a time. And eventually it gets to the point where you think, actually, you know what? Now people recognize my name. They think of me first when the time comes that they need someone that does what I do. So until fairly recently, we worked with a funeral director. Now, people don't need funeral directors every day, thank goodness, but our work with that funeral director was to raise their reputation and raise their profile in the community, so that when that time came, people thought of their name, because what in the competition for them was a very well-known local name, and they wanted to be thought of at the same time, or even ahead of, as well as all the national chains there are that do funerals as well. And
so it's a consistent 6-12 month build to that, not one hit wonder. I'm going to hire you for 1 month and expect to be famous.
No. Well, I mean, you'll get some benefit out of doing a one-hit wonder, but that's it. It will come and it will go. Really, for PR to really be effective, spread your budget out over 6 months, 12 months, and really, build and build and build. And you'll see the benefits. You'll start to see the benefits after 2 months, 3 months of that, of doing a little bit each month. Because and that's when you start to really build on your reputation.
Great. Kevin, that's really great advice. I'm sure the people listening really appreciate that deeper understanding of how to engage an audience through PR. Thank you so much for that. If anyone is listening to this and they think, do you know what, I do want to have a PR agency, and Kevin seems to know what he's talking about, how will they get hold of you? Will they just go to your website?
Yeah, of course. So it's www.briscoepr.co.uk, and you can find all of our contact details there as well. So, and a contact form as well. So just drop us a line and we'll come back to you with some ideas and some thoughts and an approach.
Great. Kevin, thank you for your time today. It's been really interesting talking to you about this. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast.